Wayne LaPierre with us in studio tonight. Wayne, thank you so much for your time, sir.
Hey, good to be with you, Cam.
You bet. Millions of Americans tuned in to watch football last night, instead getting a lecture on gun control by Bob Costas after the murder-suicide involving the NFL player Jovan Belcher. What's your reaction to all of this?
Well, it's kind of like my phone started ringing the minute it happened, and I started getting all kinds of communications from people just disgusted. I mean, they tuned in to watch a sporting event, and meanwhile, what they get in regard to this cold-blooded murder that took place is they get a national sportscaster whining about his social agenda that he wants adopted to ban firearms and ban handguns. I mean, the American public, it's shameful. They're disgusted by it.
Well, absolutely. You know, I wasn't even watching the game last night, I got to tell you, and all of a sudden, my Twitter feed just exploded. It was like my phone was just, and so I got online and I saw what was going on, found the video clip, saw within 10 minutes, had seen what Bob Costas had said, and you know, I got to tell you, Wayne, America, there were a lot of Americans who were ticked off, who were very angry about this and what Bob Costas said. The idea that you can be opposed to additional gun control in this country does not mean that you are callous. It does not mean that you are heartless. It does not mean that you do not care about people who live in violent neighborhoods. In fact, the NRA has worked to lift gun bans in some of the most violent cities in America so that people can have a fighting chance, because gun control doesn't keep them safe.
Exactly. I mean, I think the American public has had their fill of what happened last night from the media conglomerates, from celebrities in this country, and trying to ram their agenda down their throat. I mean, the fact is they only care about anything when it involves a celebrity. And then what happens is we get their agenda. They try to piggyback their national agenda on the back of whatever tragedy occurs that involves some celebrity and ram it down the throats of the rest of America. I mean, here's the deal. Bob Costas doesn't care about the crime that goes on in Chicago and the murderers that go on day after day after day. He doesn't talk about that. I mean, Bob Costas is not there when the average citizen is assaulted by some criminal. And, I mean, Bob Costas last night, he sure doesn't talk about the woman that saved herself from being raped by having a handgun. I mean, he doesn't say anything. He wouldn't have said a thing last night if this woman had saved her life by having a firearm available from Jovan Belcher. He wouldn't have said anything about it. Instead, what we get is his social agenda on the back of this columnist out in Kansas City, trying to piggyback his agenda on the back of this national tragedy and spew it all over America, when what he's advocating will do nothing to make America safer. In fact, it would make it more dangerous for the average law-abiding citizen.
Absolutely.
And, you know, Wayne, he talks about, hey, I'm going to give you a perspective. But what he really gave the public was a bunch of lies. He talks about, and he's quoting this commentator, and he's agreeing with him, Jason Whitlock, and he's saying, that handguns do not enhance safety. And as you said, all you got to do is ask one of the armed citizens who looks you right in the eye every time you talk to him, and they'll say to you, you know what, if I didn't have that firearm with me, I wouldn't be here talking to you. And as you mentioned, the victim, I mean, she was totally defenseless against this 6-foot guy that weighs 240 pounds. What if she had a firearm?
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, the fact is, and we know other countries. I mean, you look at the suicide rates in other countries. I mean, my gosh, the U.S. is not even in the top quarter of the world's on suicide. Most of the countries which have gun bans, like China, Russia, South Korea, Cuba, all these countries lead the U.S. in suicides. You're not going to stop suicides by taking freedom away from law-abiding people. Somebody wants to kill themselves, going to kill themselves. That's what the facts show. But Bob Costas, again, I mean, they have no idea what's going on in the real world. I live in the real world. People call me every day and say, Wayne, I probably wouldn't be alive today if I didn't have a firearm to protect myself from this criminal. Women call me and say, Wayne, you know, I was driving the Texas roads late at night, and thank God I had a carry permit, because 2 thugs tried to drive my car off the road, and they come at me with a tire iron, and I think I would have been raped and murdered if I didn't have my gun and pull it out and say, get the heck out of here. I mean, average people, that are not celebrities, that don't live with bodyguards, security systems, that aren't rich and famous to the point where they get their permits in these big cities while the average people are denied it, they understand better than anybody that a firearm, the Second Amendment, makes them safer.
Absolutely.
But you know, Wayne, a lot of these people that were sounding off on Twitter and Facebook, they were saying, you know what, Costas needs to go, that he needs to be fired over this. What do you think? Does he need to be fired? Do you need an apology? What do you think he needs to do?
I think he needs to apologize, and I wish he'd go. I'll tell you that. I mean, but you know, I get this. This is just typical of what you get out of the big media conglomerates in this country. I mean, how many times over the last 20 years have I gone into the boardrooms of Newsweek up in New York City? Have I gone into these networks and they all go, Wayne, you're out of touch. The NRA's out of touch. And I go, I'm not out of touch. You guys are out of touch. You know, your problem's not the NRA. Your problem is the vast majority of the American people that revere their right to own a firearm in this country under the Second Amendment. They know it makes themselves safer in this country, and they are committed not to lose it. There's a tidal wave of support for the Second Amendment in this country, and that's the wave that NRA rides. But let me say this. I mean, the day we stop calling murderers murderers, this country's in trouble in this country.
Yeah.
I mean, we're in trouble in this country. And what about this poor young woman? I mean, she was killed in cold blood by this murderer. And yet you turn on the media and everybody's whining about this and whining about, what about her? I mean, my gosh, I mean, let's get to the point. The person's responsible is the person committed the murderer. We need to start going in and take these violent criminals that are committing crime in general off of the streets. And that's not what's being done. Bob Costas wasn't talking about that last night. He wasn't talking about with these murders in Chicago, out of 90 jurisdictions in the country, Chicago's 89th in terms of enforcing the federal gun laws against the violent gangs that are killing people. Nope, nothing about that at all. And I'll tell you this, I mean, there is nothing about a violent gang in Chicago committing a crime with or without a firearm that leads to disarming all the law-abiding people in Chicago. And that's the type of nonsense Bob Costas was spouting last night.
Well, you know, and you had commentators out there saying, hey, you know what, he wasn't pushing legislation. Hey, he was talking about the fact that we don't need guns, and he was blaming the guns. Isn't that indirectly pushing legislation? Isn't this about pursuing an anti-gun agenda, which NBC has been doing for years?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, America got it. That's why they're so upset about what Bob Costas did last night. I mean, they know that what he was advocating was eliminating their right to own a firearm under the Second Amendment of the Constitution of the United States.
Yeah, and all they have to do is look at how well that worked in Chicago, and look at how well that worked in Washington, D.C. Look at how well it's working in California. California's violent crime rate is about the same as it is in Texas right now, and Texas has much better gun laws. Where would people rather choose to live, in a big city in Texas or a big city in California? Because you've got the ability to defend yourself and those that you love. And Wayne, you know, again, it bothers me so much as an NRA member to hear this, because I've seen the work that the NRA has done. I've heard the voices of people who live in places like New York City and Chicago who, I mean, yeah, you were just up there.
I was just up there, and they look right at you. And they'll tell you that their gun laws got in their way. That, you know, and many people who had firearms look right at me and say, hey, I was the lucky one. Yeah. I had a firearm. My neighborhood, you know, in my neighborhood, other people didn't. And they didn't rely. They didn't have anybody they could rely on. They couldn't rely on the police. They were stretched to the limit. They couldn't, 911 wasn't answering all their calls. They were just left, it was them, and that's all they had. And if they didn't have a gun, they were in trouble.
This was a crime that was committed, and criminals break laws. That's what apparently is lost on Bob Costas, with all his social theories and everything else. That's the bottom line. It was a crime. Criminals break laws. There's a lot of different ways this crime could have been committed. I mean, my gosh, he's an NFL linebacker. He could have strangled her to death. Yeah. Look at O.J. Simpson, what he did with. I mean, you look at countries that have gun bans, as I've said. I mean, their suicide rates are way higher than the United States. Yeah. And, I mean, this is an anti-Second Amendment agenda by somebody in the media with access to these media conglomerates that are more than happy to amplify that all over the country and try to ram it down the throats of average American citizens, that when they're at the scene of the crime, they're there totally alone. Bob Costas is not with them. NBC's not with them. The gun ban movement's not with them. They're there alone, and their best chance to survive that crime is a firearm to save their life and save their family and protect themselves.
Absolutely. And the good news is they don't have to be alone right now. They can join the NRA and, join a part of the largest organization in America protecting and defending the right to keep and bear arms.
Yeah, I mean, we're about to be victim of a siege against the Second Amendment in this country going into Obama's second term. I mean, it's going to be ugly. It's going to come hard, fast, and soon, and we're going to have to survive this period of unprecedented danger. And the best way to survive it is make the NRA stronger than ever. Never has membership in NRA been more important than right now.
Absolutely. Wayne, thank you again, sir, for coming in studio tonight. Good talking to you, sir.
Thanks, Cam. Good to be with you.